Hello, welcome to another Magic the Gathering video. Sorry for the delay, but what with Christmas and all the sort of post-Christmas projects around the house I've been doing, and also the customary gap, or slightly seemed to me anyway, the slightly larger gap you get between the first expansion set of a block and the second, which leaves me with not a lot of new product to talk about in the gap. So they've all sort of conspired against me and left me with sort of a month, I suppose, between videos. So what I thought I'd do, because you know the next set, Gate Crash, isn't going to be out for another couple of weeks. To fill the gap, I thought I'd just do a opening of an older theme deck. So this is a theme deck from the Planeshift set. This is the Domain deck. Now, it was from Invasion Block, and Invasion Block introduced an interesting mechanic called Domain. Now, what Domain does is it rewards you, really, for playing as many different coloured basic lands as you can. So, the Domain cards generally will increase in power depending on the number of different basic lands you have in play. When we open the deck, we'll come on to how that actually works. So there were three sets in the block, in the Invasion block. So we have Invasion, Planeshift and Apocalypse, and each one of those sets had a 5-colour deck as part of their sort of theme deck offering. So there were 4 theme decks in each set, and one out of those 4 was a 5-colour deck. So for Invasion it was Spectrum, for Planeshift it was Domain, which is this deck, and for Apocalypse it was a deck called Pandemonium. So let's open this up and see what sort of we've got inside. Just a quick look at the back. Again, with these theme decks from this era, you used to find that they would give you a premium basic land in here in addition to the deck, so that would be like a foil basic land card. So things to look for this deck are sort of, you know, what the mana base is like, and with this, because it's based on the number of basic lands in play, or the number of different types of basic lands, we're looking for obviously cards that fetch lands, rather than cards that just generate mana, because of the specifics of the domain keyword or domain mechanic. So on the top here we have our foil basic land. Let me just try and find the there it is. Just so you can see what else you get in these old style theme decks. So we have a little questionnaire, like a feedback questionnaire about, I'm assuming it's specific to the sets. Overall, would you rate each of the following features of Planeshift set? So yeah. And then here's our obligatory deck guide for this particular deck. There you can see. Just explains the makeup of the deck there, and how you play the deck. So one thing I do know with this deck is we're probably going to see a very high percentage of you know, non-creature based stuff. So what I'm talking about is things like, you know, stuff that fetch lands and the lands themselves. So there's our foil land, and we'll go through this, just count these off. So they're in the deck. We're going to see 5 colours. So we have 3 plains, 3 islands, 3 swamps, 3 mountains, and I would expect there to be a lot of forests. One of the reasons is because a lot of the sort of fetching stuff would tend to be in green. So let's see what we got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, 8. So 8. So that's the end of our basic land. So let's look at what we've got in terms of non-basic land. So we have a terminal moraine. Let me just get this in a bit closer for you. So this one, you tap it, add 1 colourless mana to your mana pool. So that wouldn't be necessarily a lot of good with a domain deck, because you actually need it to be a basic land. So it just purely generates colourless mana. But for 2 colourless, you can tap it, sacrifice it, and search your library for a basic land card and put that into play, although it would be tapped, and then you would shuffle your library. So there's 1, 2 of those. So that complements our basic lands. So moving on to the actual other cards, which aren't lands, we have Samite Pilgrim. So this is basically a 1 and a white for 1/1, which has an ability that prevents X damage that would be dealt to target creature this turn, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. So straight away we see this domain mechanic, although it's not mentioned. That's essentially what domain does. It looks at the number of basic land types among lands that you control, and then adjusts whatever it is accordingly. So remember, it's basic land types. It's easy to get confused with this. You know, it's not, let's say you had 5 forests in play, well, sorry, let's correct that. Supposing you had, I don't know, 3 plains in play, and this in play. So in this case, you would only have 1 basic land type, that being plains. So it's 1, not 3. However, if you had a plains, a swamp, and a mountain, then that would be 3 basic land types. And there's 3 of these in the deck. Wayfaring Giant, another one with domain. So this one is based around pumping it for each basic land type, +1/+1 pump. Starts out as a 1/3 for 5 and a white, so fairly high costed. But if you've actually managed to get 5, 1 each of your basic land types, then that's going to basically pump it up to a 6/8. Cava Recluse. Target land becomes a forest until end of turn. Kavu Scout gets +1/+0 for each basic land type. And there's 2 of those in deck. Koren Dryad, another domain. Well, actually, this is a bit more specific. So it's saying whenever you play a white, blue, black, or red spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Koren Dryad. So it's not strictly speaking domain, but it's a similar concept in that it's, you know, rewarding you for playing certain colours. Koren Explorer. Add to your mana pool 1 mana of any colour the land an opponent controls could produce. So there's some. This deck has sort of mana fixing going on as well, because you know you're going to be wanting to play lots of different colours of land, but that may, in other ways, affect you or impede you. So there are then ways on other cards of then converting those cards into different colours. 2 of those, Koren Explorers. Koren Trailblazer. This has got a fetch land ability on it. There's 2 of those. Magnagoth Treefolk, which gives you land walk, or has land walk on it, for each basic land type among lands you control. Stratadon, so this is 10 colourless for a 5/5, but it does cost 1 less to play for each basic land type among lands you control, and has trample on it. And there's 2 of those. Strength of Unity. So +1/+1 pump based on domain, and you basically enchant a creature with that. Confound, counter target spells that targets 1 or more creatures, and you get to draw a card for 1 and a blue. Worldly Council, again, tied in with basic land types. Look at the top X of your library, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. 2 of those. Allied Strategies, card draw based on domain. 2 of those. Exotic Curse. So this one, you enchant a creature and it gets -1/-1 based on domain. Exotic Disease. So this will cause a target player to lose life and you to gain life based on the number of basic land types. So again, domain based. There's 2 of those. Breath of Darigaz, I think that is. So this has Kicker on it. I think this was the first set where Kicker was introduced, or the first Kicker was introduced in this block. It's 1 and a red, and the Kicker cost is 2 colourless. Breath of Darigaz deals 1 damage to each creature without flying and each player. If you paid the Kicker cost, Breath of Darigaz deals 4 damage to each creature without flying and each player instead. Tribal Flames, creature or player damage based on where the X is based on domain. And there are 3 of those in the deck. Gaia's Might. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Again, another instant pump. This is an instant pump spell, so a bit like sort of giant growth type of thing, but it's based on domain. Harrow. This is a card for hunting down those sort of basic land where you want to get the different basic land types into play. It's 2 and a green. You have to sack a land so as additional cost, but it does put 2 basic lands into play, and they're not tapped either. So not surprising to find 3 of those, because that's going to be key to sorting and getting different coloured basic lands into play. Primal Growth has a kicker on it, and this is an interesting kicker. We're used to seeing kicker costs with a certain amount of mana having to be expended. The kicker cost on this is to sack a creature. So search your library for a basic land card. So again, it gets fetches a land on the ability. On the spell. Put the card into play, then shuffle your library. If you paid the kicker cost, so if you sacrificed a creature, instead search your library for 2 basic land cards and put them into play, and then shuffle your library. Wandering Stream gives you 2 life, again domain based, so that's 2 life for each basic land type. Ordered Migration, 1/1 blue bird creature tokens, and then that number of 1/1 blue bird creature tokens is based on domain. Rith's Charm, so I think we've got a couple of charms in here. Instant, red and green. Notice that the previous card as well was multicoloured, so we're moving on to sort of gold coloured borders here because they're multicolour. Destroy target non-basic land or put 3 1/1 green sapling creature tokens into play, or prevent all damage a source of your choice would deal this turn. So with these sort of charms, you get do this or this or this. Trevor's Charm, green, white, blue combination. So again, you have to choose one to destroy a target enchantment or remove a target attacking creature from the game, or draw a card, then discard a card from the hand. And there we have the deck. So notice there, obviously, not surprisingly, a lot of domain cards, a lot of ways of fetching out basic lands in here, and you know, a few kicker costs as well. And interesting kicker cost in this deck where you have to sacrifice a creature if you want to activate that kicker ability. So there we have the domain deck, named after that that mechanic. I'll just quickly flick back through all the cards and just give you an overview of the sort of multicoloured nature of this deck. So again, because of that, you know, you're playing lots of different colours. In basic lands, you get to play lots of different colour cards as well. Let's just have a quick look before we finish this up at the bit on playing the deck in here. So as with a lot of these multicoloured decks, you know, it's not unusual for you to expect, say, take a bit of damage up front whilst you're trying to develop your basic land base to exploit this domain mechanic. So while that's going on, you're going to be maybe taking a bit of damage from your opponent, but of course there are ways of rectifying that and closing the gap between your life totals. And of course you get quite heavy card draw as well through some of the cards, so that's obviously going to help. And it points out as well that, as you've seen, there's quite a few decks that aren't strictly domain cards, but they actually work well because of the need to satisfy the domain mechanic. Creates a sort of a synergy. So to improve the deck, what they're suggesting is, one thing is to take out some creatures and remove. In fact, you could only remove an additional one tribal flame because there's already 3 in the deck. But also, you know, other creature control spells if you felt you needed to do that. But if you're fond of playing creatures, then you could just put, you know, because again this is a multicolour deck, 5-colour deck, you can just elect to put your best creatures in any colour, because you're going to have the mana on hand to play that. Okay, so there we have it, the domain theme deck from Planeshift set. Thanks for watching.